Hi, I'm Jane Reel,
And I'm Sue Page.
and we are doing Race in the United States. Is that the right one, Sue? I always mix
Yes.
the name up.
Race in the
Uh,
United States. Yes.
so we're here to debunk two myths. I'm going to let Susan go first. As you know, we were having some technical difficulties. I did figure out a way to flip back and forth so you can see both of us. So Sue's myth is now first on our new poster. So, Sue, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Jane. So my myth was that it is believed that when minorities or people of color or non-whites move into a neighborhood, the property values go down and the neighborhoods deteriorate because of these people moving in. Um, so, Jane, what did you think about that when we were reading it? Did you have a thought before reading the myth answer?
Well, I come from an area where it was an all white neighborhood, and then we had Cuban refugees come into our area when Castro let them out. So I actually experienced a lot of that, seeing the families leave. So it was very familiar stuff for me because I witnessed that firsthand.
Right, right. Well, part of the debunking of this is it's not the refugees or the so-called minorities coming in. It's
Right,
the white people who would leave and take their resources. So
right,
you've got people with a lower income moving into a neighborhood, living the American dream, and then all the money is leaving, which means the schools deteriorate, healthcare, services like the police and EMS all deteriorate. And when I learned that, I thought that was really interesting because I grew up in an all white neighborhood, um, and I believed the myth because that's what I was
right,
taught as a child. And I didn't
right,
see the multicultural people coming in like you did. So it's just so weird how our lives were so different.
right. So my question to you is like being that you always say that, not always, but you tell me that, you did not have the same background that I did, like living in a multicultural neighborhood. Like, how did it make you feel to think like what these people went through? You know, they're moving in, like you said, ready to embrace this American dream, and then the white people are like, oh no, we're out of here, and they take everything with them, and then they're kind of back to square one. Like you living that dream life that they were looking for, right? Like living in this neighborhood where things stay the same. How did that make you feel, like to think what would have happened if your neighborhood changed?
Um, Back then I didn't think anything because I didn't know any different, but I think it's depressing to think
Mhm.
that as being like from the white American side of things that there's that much power in just the skin color, in your skin color, and it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if you're hardworking or whatnot. And it's really unsettling to see that it's actually the white people moving away and segregating themselves.
yes,
Um, I can't imagine myself being in the opposite position, like moving into a Latina neighborhood and being the quote minority and making less money. And I can't imagine myself doing that because I've never
yeah.
experienced it. I've never seen it at all. So it's
Yeah, I would imagine it's not fun to be on that end of it. I was fortunate that I wasn't on that end of it. I witnessed it. My family stayed, but we did see the neighborhood deteriorate and things not available over, as the years went by. So,
yeah. Well, with us, they back when I was in kindergarten, it was in the 70s. They were talking about integrating schools um,
right.
with the quote minorities and those of us white students. And I remember the protests going on. My mom had always said it wasn't whether or not we got mixed, but it was the fact that at 5 years old, I would be put on a bus to go across the city of Boston 2 hours or
Yeah.
more. And in order for me to go to that school, one of those 5 year olds had to go to my school. And it was on both sides, like both parents were
Yeah.
objection to that. And the parents in the group of my mom, with my mom, the white group, we'll call it, opened a
Mm,
school. So that didn't happen. And then we eventually moved out of West Roxbury to a suburb where
okay.
to be honest, even now, if I see a person of African American descent, it's so odd to me because I still live in a predominantly white
Because you're
area.
not, yeah, yeah.
So it sometimes it catches my eye, and then I just go about my business. I like to think I'm colorblind, and I know I'm not, but I don't have those thoughts in my head like something
Yeah,
like,
but if you, as long as I feel like as long as you feel it, you may have that initial reaction. And I remember my niece was a year old, and um, my sister lived in a neighborhood where it was not multicultural; it was basically white people. And we were at Walmart, and she saw an African American couple, and she looked at my sister and looked at me, and she goes, "What's wrong with them?" I'm like, "What's wrong with who?" And she goes, "Why is their skin like that? What did they do?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we had to have the conversation of there's nothing wrong with them. They're African American. They're black people and they have different skin color. So it is, you know, interesting to see from that perspective of it because I don't, my husband is Hispanic and I'm used to his family and, I have a brother-in-law who's Indian and a very, very good friend of our family who's Chinese. So it doesn't matter to me. It's like, you're a good person. Come on in. Doors open,
right.
right?
Well, just a last question to think of. If you were to move into a predominantly white neighborhood and you noticed that people were moving out once you and your family moved in, how would you feel? Just out of curiosity, how would you? I think I know,
I
but
can't even imagine. I would feel awful. I would feel like what's wrong with me? Why are they singling me out that because I walk in, they walk out? I can't even imagine the feelings that I would have. Like I would be devastated,
yeah.
heartbroken.
Well, you can move into my neighborhood. It's all good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're pretty diverse here. I live in a nice neighborhood. We're fortunate. My husband and I moved to a nice neighborhood, and but we have all this area is full of all different races. Our community is really mixed, and it's a great place to live and raise your kids. Around that, it's easier, I think, for them, and I think you can attest to that. That when they don't see it, they don't know it. It's no different to them. People walking in and out of my house of all different shapes and sizes. They don't care.
Yeah,
So
there's a push now. There's a lot of I think it's Somalian refugees that are coming in, um, and I can only imagine how they feel coming from their country here, trying to learn
yeah,
how we do things and how to communicate. And
yeah. Communication part must be really difficult.
yeah, yeah, they do. There's
Agreed.
a program now, transitional housing assistance, where they have someone assigned to them that shows them you don't cut your meat up on the floor. Use a cutting board on the counter, and
Right.
this is how you shop. And I just can't imagine how they're feeling trying to blend,
Adapt to all that.
yeah,
Yeah.
adapt, and then have people look at their color and be like, ugh, you know, I don't know.
Yep. Or you're wearing a hijab. Why are you wearing that? My
Yeah,
daughter's friend is Muslim, and we always tease her because she's got a great sense of humor, and all this stuff going on with our president, it sits very heavy on her heart, and she's like, oh, I'm wearing a hat today, so she calls her hijab a hat. But how many times people have said things to her in front of me as an adult with her out, said things or made faces and stuff at a 19-year-old girl, like
it's ridiculous.
whatever. It is, but race is crazy. So my myth was you can't tell somebody's race by looking at them. So I know, some things are obvious, but just because you have mean you're African American. Just because you have almond shaped eyes doesn't mean that you're Asian. So that was my debunk on it, was that just looking at somebody, you can't tell. I had a friend that was African American. Both parents were African American. She had green eyes and she was as white as I was. So you did not know that she was African American. There was no way to tell. And, my husband had, when he was a child, he's from Ecuador, he was blonde hair. His brother has blonde hair and green eyes. So, you never know somebody's ethnic background just by looking at them. Anything um, could be anything. Hispanic people look Italian, and black people can look white, and white people can have traits that some African Americans have. And um, part of the studies that the information that I found was that it's not even a genetic trait with the way you look. It started out with your geographical location. Are you close to the sun? Are you of people that works with your hands? So these are things that really define, and not one trait belongs to one so-called race. Like the almond-shaped eyes, it's not only Japanese and Chinese. Filipino people have that. I know people in Alaska, could have those almond-shaped eyes. So, definitely looking at somebody, you should not just assume their race by what they look like, for
Yeah,
sure.
I agree. There's so many now mixed couples. I'd rather
Right.
say mixed than interracial, but you know, Hispanics and Latinos with white Americans or darker skinned, or
Right.
so almond eyes can be anywhere. It,
Sure.
it, it
Sure.
doesn't matter anymore. So do you think, one of the things that we read was that, as a white person, people will look at somebody and say, oh, they're African American or they're
Hmm.
Mexican, and even if they're
Right.
from Cuba, they're Mexican. Do you think
Right. Oh
that
yeah.
people of a different race do the same thing? Like, might look at me and say, oh, she's white, maybe she's Irish, maybe she's just American, or like look at,
Right.
somebody else and say, oh, they're African American, but they're actually not. Do you think that it goes both ways, or do you think it's more on the white side of looking at people?
I used to think it was mostly on the white side. But I think because race is such a factor these days, I think we're all doing it, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Like I like to think that I don't look at somebody and make a determination, but I'm human. I do. If I see a kid, whether he's white, black, coming at me with a pair pair of baggy pants and they're hanging down past his butt and a big sweatshirt and a beatbox on his ears, I'm assuming he's a thug, because that's what he looks like. And I know that's not racial, but it's the same deal. You look at somebody, and it's human nature to make a judgment immediately what's on the outside. So yeah, I think nowadays, I think we all do it. Any race, any culture. I think that they're looking at us and saying, "Oh, there's the white girl. There's that privileged white lady." Little do they know that I put myself through school. I paid. It took me 5 years to buy a house and another 15 years to buy my next house. So it's no, I'm not privileged. I don't get everything handed to me because I'm white. Or same thing like you just said with Hispanics. They assume that all Hispanics are Mexican. They're
Right.
not. My husband's from Ecuador. They have nothing to do with Mexico. They don't eat tortillas and wear a big hat in the sun. So yeah. Back to your question. I think at this point we all do it. What do you? I mean, do you feel that way, or do you think it's mostly white people making that judgment call?
Um, I, I s- I think everyone does it, like, because it's not only race based. It's like you said, you
Sure.
see someone with baggy pants and it's a thug, or some people look at an
Right.
officer and say, "Oh my God," like
Right. Is he gonna beat me up or kill me?
if I
Yeah.
get pulled over by a state
Right.
trooper, I'm shaking in my boots. Not because
Right.
of any other reason. Um, I do think it's across the board, but not having a lot of different cultural experiences, I lean more towards the white looking out, like being a white glass looking out, because I don't have the
Hmm.
experiences on the other side looking in.
Right.
Um, so I guess I'd
No,
like to
that's
think
a
it's
great point of
everybody,
view.
but I
I think it
definitely,
is now.
yeah,
I don't think 20 years ago it was. I think it was mostly, and I hate the word minorities because I don't feel
yeah,
non-whites trying to find their place in society and trying to survive and fit in and succeed and just you know make something of their lives. And now I think again, especially lately with all the struggles that we're having, I think everybody's looking at everybody at this point and thinking everybody that wears a hijab is a terrorist, and
Yeah.
everybody that wears baggy pants is going to mug me. And, every white person is privileged and they all live in big mansions and drive Mercedes.
Oh, they're so
I
wrong.
think all races do it. Yo, they have no idea how wrong they are. But I think we all do it to an
Right.
extent. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's human nature. And then once you get to know somebody, then you really have the right to make the determination of what kind of a person they are. But unfortunately, race is a huge factor in society today.
I find um, that I'm more curious now than I was as a kid. I mean,
Yeah. Oh
growing
yeah.
up, there was white and black. That's all we knew. I didn't know about Mexican or Latina or Cuban or growing up in Boston area. It was white and black. Those were the only two races that there were, and we were pretty much separated. So growing up, we were separated. Now, being older, my one of my coworkers, her husband is from Mexico. So I'm starting to learn a little bit more about other
Right.
cultures. But I was very, they call us privileged, but in my perspective, I was very sheltered. And
Right. And that's
I
not
feel
good
like
either.
I feel like I missed out on a lot of education.
Right.
So yeah, so that was pretty
Understood.
hard.
Yeah, but you have the opportunity now, so that's what's good about all this is, being older and having the internet. There's so much at your fingertips to learn and know. But I have to say, Sue, meeting you has been awesome experience for me, and I really enjoyed doing this project with you. I feel like we both learned a lot, and um, speaking for myself, I think you were really respectful and while I'm not considered a minority, but my husband and children are Hispanic, so I feel the need to, you know, face that on for them. And I just feel like working with you has been so much fun and enlightening, and I learned a lot on this project from you. So thank you.
Same here. I feel like I learned a lot too, and I it was nice to talk to someone like in my age group that had different experiences, so I could learn a little bit more.
Right.
And this project was really interesting, and it's really interesting to read all the myths and the
Yeah.
way things were set up, and you know what they were expected to be and how they weren't.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I agree. I learned a lot. And I'm, grateful for the experience, and it was nice to make a friend out of it.
absolutely, absolutely.
So Jackson, we hope you like our video, and we covered all the bases for you. And again, I'm Jane, and I thank you.
And I'm Sue, and I thank you as well.
Have a great night.